It was on a cold autumn evening that the Adams family first laid eyes on the mansion. Situated on the outskirts of a sleepy town, the large, crumbling estate had been abandoned for years. The previous owner, an eccentric old relative no one in the family had ever met, had passed away, leaving the house to them. The inheritance came with little fanfare, just a few cryptic letters and a will written in an indecipherable hand. Lucy and Mark Adams, along with their teenage children, Sarah and Ben, had never been particularly fond of the idea of inheriting property from a stranger. But when they saw the mansion, its looming silhouette against the dimming sky, something pulled them in. The house had a charm to it. Hidden beneath its dust-covered windows and decaying facade, there was a sense of mystery. The estate had long been the subject of rumors among the locals, whispered tales of strange happenings. But the Adams family dismissed it as mere superstition. The first night in the mansion, they explored its vast, empty halls. The air felt heavy, thick with time, as if the house was holding its breath. As they made their way through the rooms, they found old furniture draped in dusty sheets, portraits of grim ancestors hanging on the walls, and a grand staircase that spiraled upwards into shadow. But the most intriguing discovery came in the parlor, a large, ornate mirror. The mirror was an antique, framed in intricate gold filigree, with delicate patterns of roses and vines etched along the edges. It stood tall, almost to the ceiling, and though the glass appeared perfectly smooth and unblemished, there was something unsettling about it. Mark was the first to notice. "Hey, look at this," he called to Lucy, his voice echoing in the silence of the room. "This mirror, it's different from the rest." Lucy joined him in front of the mirror. The reflection seemed normal at first. She saw herself standing beside Mark, her expression soft and curious. The room behind them was the same, dust motes drifting lazily in the air. But then something caught her eye. In the reflection, the figure of Sarah was not standing beside her, as she should have been. Instead, Sarah was in another room, standing at the window, staring out into the dark forest beyond. "Sarah?" Lucy turned around quickly, but there was no sign of her daughter in the room. Mark frowned, his brow furrowing. "She was with us just a second ago, wasn't she?" Lucy stepped back, her heart beginning to race. The reflection in the mirror shifted again. Sarah's image at the window flickered, then seemed to vanish. The mirror's surface rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. "I don't like this," Lucy whispered, instinctively stepping away from the mirror. Mark, ever the skeptic, chuckled nervously. "It's just an old mirror. Nothing to worry about." But the feeling of unease lingered, settling over them like a fog. That night, as the family settled into their rooms, strange things began to happen. Sarah, who had been in the parlor with them earlier, was missing. Her bedroom door was locked from the inside, and when Lucy finally managed to open it, there was no trace of her daughter. A cold chill settled over the house as the minutes turned to hours. The clock on the wall ticked louder, almost mocking them as they searched the mansion. Each time they checked the parlor mirror, Sarah's reflection had changed, showing her in increasingly strange and terrifying positions, always out of reach, always just beyond their grasp. By the time the family reunited in the main hall, terror had set in. The mirror had become an entity of its own, a dark portal to something otherworldly. And the worst part? The reflection in the mirror no longer showed reality. It was showing a twisted version of their world, one where the rules of time and space no longer applied. The next day, they found Sarah. She wasn't far from the mansion. She was standing in the garden, her eyes wide and unblinking, as though she had been there for hours. When Mark and Lucy rushed to her, their daughter spoke in a voice that was not her own, cold, hollow, as if it came from some deep, unfathomable place. "The mirror calls," she whispered. "It wants you to look." As days passed, the family began to notice that things were changing. The mirror's reflection became more and more distorted. At first, it showed simple oddities, small events before they happened, a chair tipping over, a door slamming shut. But soon, it began to show them things that shouldn't have been possible. The mirror's reflections began to show moments that hadn't occurred yet, disturbing visions of their own deaths, Sarah lying motionless on the floor, Ben running through the woods being chased by something unseen, Mark and Lucy crying in the parlor, trapped in the reflection forever. The more they stared into the mirror, the more they began to act on the visions. Mark, desperate to protect his family, tried to lock the mirror away, but every time he turned away, it beckoned him back, drawing him into its gaze. It whispered promises of control, of knowing the future, of avoiding the inevitable. At night, they could hear the mirror calling them, soft at first, like a lullaby, then louder, sharper, demanding. It was Lucy who first realized the truth. The mirror didn't show the future. It created it. Each time they acted on its visions, they unwittingly twisted reality further into the nightmare it wanted. The mirror fed on their fear, their desires, and the more they gave into it, the more it corrupted their world. It wasn't just showing them the future, it was shaping it. The final night in the mansion came swiftly. The family, now driven to madness by the mirror, had completely lost track of time. Every reflection showed a different version of themselves, always distorted, always hiding something darker. The lines between the real world and the mirror's reflection blurred. Lucy stood before the mirror, her face pale and drawn. "We have to destroy it," she said, her voice trembling. But as she raised her hand to smash the glass, she saw something in the reflection that froze her blood. In the mirror, she wasn't holding a hammer as she was in reality. She was standing alone in the darkened parlor, her reflection staring back at her with an expression of pure malice. The reflection smiled, a slow, cruel grin that grew wider with every second. Her heart skipped a beat. Lucy, the voice that spoke from the reflection, wasn't hers. It was deep, guttural, almost familiar. The reflection reached out to touch the glass, its fingers pressing against the cold surface. "You don't know what you're doing." The voice of the reflection, as it spoke, slowly shifted and warped, becoming a chorus of voices all at once, each one darker, more desperate. "Leave us, or you will never leave," they whispered in unison. Lucy backed away, terrified, but when she looked behind her, the parlor was empty, no longer real. The mansion was gone, replaced by endless darkness. There was only the mirror, standing as a doorway to another world. The mirror rippled. Her reflection reached out, its fingers slowly turning to blackened claws. The room around her twisted, the walls stretching and warping into grotesque shapes. The air grew thick, suffocating. Before Lucy could react, a force pulled her toward the glass. She screamed for Mark, for Sarah, but they didn't respond. The reflection of her family, once so familiar, twisted into monstrous versions of themselves, distorted by the malevolent force behind the glass. With a final, sickening crack, Lucy was consumed. Her body collided with the mirror, her scream swallowed by its depths. The house fell silent once again, and the mirror stood still. Years later, a new family would come to inherit the mansion. The old mirror, as it always did, would wait, patiently, silently, ready to show them a reflection that was not their own. It would wait for them to look,